President Trump threatened to deploy the U.S. military on the streets of America to stop demonstrations. Now, he says, no, I just want to stop the looters. I don't want to stop the peaceful protesters. I'm with the peaceful protesters. But if you believe that that's the case, I have a bridge to sell you. Because Trump gassed peaceful protesters near the White House in order to clear a path so he could do a photo op in front of a church holding a Bible. In order to get this picture, he gassed peaceful protesters. Now, that's not an opinion. That's not up in the air. There's not multiple interpretations of it. That's exactly what happened. We have it on camera. So the guy who just gassed peaceful protesters is somehow going to bring in the military, and the military will differentiate between the peaceful protesters and the looters and the rioters. I don't buy it. In fact, you talk to anybody in the military, or I shouldn't say anybody. You talk to many people in the military, and they will tell you, I've been trained to kill. My job is to kill. And now you want to deploy me on the streets of the U.S. to do something that's not in my job description, that I haven't been trained for, that I'm not equipped for, that I shouldn't be doing. So obviously this is, a giant issue, and I want to go ahead and show you part of his speech that he did before he had the peaceful protesters gassed, and then also you'll see some of the photo op. Let's take a look.
That is why I am taking immediate presidential action to stop the violence and restore security and safety in America. I am mobilizing all available federal resources, civilian and military, to stop the rioting and looting, to end the destruction and arson, and to protect the rights of law-abiding Americans, including your Second Amendment rights. Therefore, the following measures are going into effect immediately. First, we are ending the riots and lawlessness that has spread throughout our country. We will end it now. Today, I have strongly recommended to every governor to deploy the National Guard in sufficient numbers that we dominate the streets. Mayors and governors must establish an overwhelming law enforcement presence until the violence has been quelled. If a city or state refuses to take the actions that are necessary to defend the life and property of their residents, then I will deploy the United States military and quickly solve the problem for them. I am also taking swift and decisive action to protect our great capital, Washington, D.C. What happened in this city last night was a total disgrace. As we speak, I am dispatching thousands and thousands of heavily armed soldiers, military personnel, and law enforcement officers to stop the rioting, looting, vandalism, assaults, and the wanton destruction of property. We are putting everybody on warning. Our 7 o'clock curfew will be strictly enforced. Those who threaten innocent life and property will be arrested, detained, and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. I want the organizers of this terror to be on notice that you will face severe criminal penalties and lengthy sentences in jail. This includes Antifa and others who are leading instigators of this violence. One law and order, and that is what it is. One law. We have one beautiful law.
We've just had to run about a block as police moved in. We've been fired at with rubber bullets. My cameraman has been hit. We've also seen tear gas being used. Here we go, they're moving through again. This is exactly what it looks like.
Press, let's go. Press, let's go. Come on. Guys, we gotta go.
Now, before we get into the more substantive stuff, let me say I have no idea why he did that photo op. I mean, gassing peaceful protesters who are clearly peaceful, just so everybody understands, that's illegal. There's going to be no consequences because the people who are doing it are the authorities and they have badges and uniforms, but that's absolutely illegal. But going to do a photo op in front of a church while holding a Bible, the thing that's so creepy about it is we have a system right now that's clearly functioning as an oligarchy. So we have an oligarch, authoritarian theocrat now. It's like he's trying to, become every negative political label that exists. When you have that third so-called stimulus bill, the bailout bill for COVID-19, where it was just a giant giveaway, $5 trillion to corporations. And the American people got crumbs. They're struggling massively, but we let corporations and wealthy folks loot the treasury. And the Goldman Sachs lackey gets to determine where the money goes. So that's an oligarchy or a kleptocracy. That's just rank corruption. We have that. Now we have the president calling in the military authoritarianism, and also he's just throwing in theocracy to boot. Like what on earth popped into his mind where he thought, oh, I got an idea. Let me pose holding a Bible. What? I guess the only thing I could come up with that would somehow put this in context is that he's trying to throw red meat out to the evangelical fundamentalist base that always votes Republican to let them know, like, hey, I'm still your guy. And see, look at me. I'm doing something you like, huh? I'm in front of a church. I'm holding up a Bible. I'm reinstating law and order, huh? So I guess that's what he's trying to do. But wow, was this a string of decisions that are absolutely unacceptable and, quite frankly, terrifying. So let's dive into the specifics of what he's trying to do here. I submit to you, here's what a reasonable conservative opinion would sound like. Oh, I despise the fact that there are rioters and looters. We have to stop the rioters and looters to protect the small businesses. By the way, we just learned that about 40% of small businesses could go bankrupt within a year because they weren't sufficiently bailed out. Like the big businesses were with the COVID-19 bailout, the Republicans capped that. So now all of a sudden the crocodile tears, oh my God, small businesses! But before, you were willing to let them die. So it's a little tough to take it seriously, but for argument's sake, let's take it seriously. Here's a reasonable conservative opinion. We need more cops, or we need the National Guard, and they need to line up the sides of the streets to make sure that there's no more looting. Perfectly reasonable conservative opinion. In fact, I would in part agree with that. I'm not in favor of looting. I'm not in favor of rioting. Duh, that's like an obvious thing. It's like the overwhelming majority of people take that position. Here's not a reasonable conservative position, and I don't know if you could even call it conservative. It's just authoritarian. Let's deploy the U.S. military on the streets of the United States of America. That is rank authoritarianism. That's what that is. Now, by the way, the legal justification he's using is like the 1806 or 1807 Insurrection Act, which apparently was a law to stop slave rebellions. Now, I submit to you that law on its face is massively unconstitutional and likely wouldn't stand up in court. But beyond that, apparently a plain-faced reading of the law says that the president can call in the military only if the states recommend it. So even if you go by a plain-faced reading of the law, he's not applying it properly, which gets to the heart of the matter, which is this is rank authoritarianism. That's what this is. Now, this is a rare instance where other people in the military are saying, no, can't happen, not going to happen, this is insane. You had General Mattis come out and say, no, this is not something that we do. We're not supposed to be a totalitarian dictatorship, authoritarian police state. Now, there are other issues where I've disagreed with Madison, agreed with Trump, like Syria. Trump said he wanted to get out of Syria. Mattis said, I don't want to get out of Syria. So there's issues where it goes the other way. But on this one, Mattis is 100% correct. Also, Defense Secretary Mark Esper was like, no, that's not a good idea to deploy the U.S. military. Again, I've heard from people in the military through the grapevine, no, this is not what we do. We're trained to kill. You don't deploy the U.S. military domestically. And by the way, that's not me saying you should deploy it overseas all willy-nilly like we currently do. No. It should only be used for self-defense. But deploying it at home, just so everybody understands, that's not something that's supposed to be within the realm of reasonable discussion or debate or discourse. That's supposed to be out of bounds. Why? Very simply, the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. Guys, deploying the U.S. military on streets in America, that's deeply against the First Amendment. Deeply against it. Why? Because the First Amendment, it protects our right to peacefully protest. And like I just explained to you, they're not going to differentiate. If the military's called in, they're not trained or able to distinguish and differentiate and say, no, those people are being peaceful. Those people are not. We're going to go after those people. No. To steal a phrase that Obama used early on in his term, you need a scalpel and you're using a hatchet. So make no mistake about it. If the U.S. military is called into U.S. streets, they would absolutely crack down on peaceful protests, which, let me reiterate, is unconstitutional. You can't do that. That's not allowed. That's not accepted. The whole point of the First Amendment is that notion is off the table. Get it out of your mind. Don't even consider it. The government cannot shut down peaceful protests. So now, again, let me reiterate something. When it comes to looting and rioting, I agree. Looting is bad. Rioting is bad. So if you're a conservative, call for more police and tell them to line up downtown protecting the small businesses. End of discussion. Or go crazy and say, let's call in the National Guard. Now, some people would conflate the two and say, well, if you're calling in the National Guard, I don't understand. Why was calling in the military that much different or that much worse? Very simply because the National Guard is also responsive to the states, and they are supposed to, there's precedent of them taking care of domestic emergencies. That's their job more so. When it comes to the U.S. military, that is not their job. That is not their job. So I'm going to put this as plain as I can. You can either be in favor of the United States Constitution and be in favor of the First Amendment, or you can be in favor of deploying the United States military on our streets here at home. You cannot have both. You cannot have both. So anybody who's defending the idea of deploying the U.S. military here at home because you need to have law and order, right? Okay, fair enough, but you're an authoritarian. Now, I'm not saying that as like a gotcha. I'm saying that as like just a plain face reading and common understanding of regular political science definitions. That is what you are if you support that. It's that simple. Again, you want to pull the law and order card and let's get tough on these people? Call for more cops, protect the small businesses, line them up, no looting, no rioting, only crack down on the people who engage in those activities. Totally reasonable opinion. Not reasonable at all. Let's call in the U.S. military under the Insurrection Act and let's occupy the streets of the United States of America. Absolutely not. Now, over the past few days, there have been so many instances, not just of looting and rioting, but also of police initiating violence. If you don't believe me, go watch our segment from the last show where they're brazenly, wantonly cracking down on peaceful protesters, and they don't care about the consequences. They're acting with impunity. So it's interesting how in this broader conversation happening at the national level, in elite circles, the only violence that's condemned and talked about as if it's unequivocally negative is the looting and the rioting. Now, again, I just said I agree, looting and rioting is bad. But why are we not also talking about the state violence? Violence is not magically more legitimate or on a higher moral plane because it's done by somebody with a uniform and a badge. That doesn't magically make it okay. The way this country is supposed to work is it's equality under the law. So justice is blind. If you commit a crime, you committed a crime, and you're going down for it. That's the way it's supposed to work. The way it works in reality is exactly what we saw like in the Zimbardo prison experiment, where you had people dress up, hey, these people are guards, these people are prisoners, and let's see what happens if we just let them loose for a couple weeks. And then what happened? All the prison guards became vicious authoritarians, doing unethical and immoral things nonstop. And the prisoners kind of became meek and passive and adopted the role of being a prisoner. So what we're seeing now is that police officers in the streets, in many, many instances, they think, I got a gun, I got a badge, I got a uniform, I am the law. What I do is by definition moral and just and correct. And they got nothing to say about that kind of violence. I haven't heard Dickie McGee's acts about that kind of violence, which is interesting because I think if it was right-wing protesters, like the Michigan protesters who went there armed at the Capitol, calling to open up the economy, I think that if there was any kind of violence against those protesters, oh my God, the conservatives would be up in arms. They'd be absolutely losing it. So I have to tell you guys, man, when it comes to the list of things that Trump has done that are the worst, this is in the top 5 for sure. For sure. You can't willy-nilly on a random Monday, because you see a couple riots happening across the United States, come out there and say, you know, I kind of disagree with that whole First Amendment thing. Wouldn't it be great if we totally ignored that? That's not supposed to be on the table of things that are acceptable. Okay? That's not an option. That's not on the menu, which is why even people who are otherwise wrong about a lot of stuff, military people, generals, even they're like, you have to be kidding me. This is deeply un-American. Deeply un-American a thing to do. So I have zero tolerance on this issue. I have none. Because honestly, people who are defending this action, I don't even know what to call it. I don't know if it's rank ignorance. I don't know if it's, you know, they're petty authoritarians and it's partisanship because they think, oh, the looters and the rioters are left-wingers and it's Antifa, so it's justified to bend the law and bend the Constitution in order to crack down on the bad people who need to be cracked down on. I don't know what it is that's going on in their minds, but I don't care because they're wrong. And the thing that frustrates me, I don't get frustrated. I don't get mad at reasonable disagreement. I really don't. You know, I think there are reasonable discussions to be had as to what is the proper response in this instance. And there's a wide array of viewpoints that I'd listen to, I'd hear out, and even if I might not agree with it, I'd think, yeah, but that's a reasonable disagreement. To threaten to call in the U.S. military in a situation like this is beyond unacceptable. And I have to tell you, we'll talk more about this later, but there is zero equivalence between Biden and Trump on this issue. None. Is it possible that Biden would maybe do the standard conservative thing of like, hey, we're going to have a bigger police presence or we're going to call in the National Guard? He might do that, sure. I mean, look at Standing Rock, look at, you know, other things that happened under the Obama administration that do show a propensity towards a standard right-wing view. What Trump is doing is not a standard right-wing view. It is rank authoritarianism. And you can add it to the list of things that are wildly unconstitutional that we allow, like torture and like Guantanamo Bay. The first thing I reference when I'm asked, why do I love this country? The very first thing I reference is the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. We are unique in our case law and our history and our repeated defense of free speech, freedom of religion, and free protest. We are unique in the world in how good we are on those issues. You send in the U.S. military to quell demonstrations? You even threaten it with the Insurrection Act? No. Totally unacceptable. I think it's a game changer. I was 98% sure I'm not going to vote for Biden because I did the calculation and I said he doesn't meet my standards. I've already loosened my standards twice. I might loosen it 3 times because I cannot sit by while Trump threatens the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. Think of the precedent this sets. And as somebody told me, okay, let's say Trump doesn't do it this time and he just threatened to use the Insurrection Act. What happens the next time? What happens the next time? See, Trump has something that Biden doesn't have, which is, I call Biden a predictable evil. I know exactly what he's going to give us. I know the exact kind of status quo nonsense he's going to shove down our throats. But Trump, every now and then, throws in a curveball of unknown evil. Like when I woke up one day and I learned we assassinated a top Iranian general and we're on the brink of war over frickin' night. And I said, oh my God, that was one of those moments where I was like, we got to get this guy out no matter what. Now, at the time, I believe Bernie was like doing really well. So it was like, oh, great, we'll replace it with Bernie. Wonderful. Now, that's obviously not an option. But like, that was one of those instances when I was like, no. There's zero equivalence between this dude and anybody else. Like zero. That is, you assassinated a top Iranian general willy-nilly as if that's a thing that should or can happen, or they don't even understand the consequences of their actions. This is another one of those moments. And I'm not even the slightest bit overstating it. You do not threaten to deploy the U.S. military on U.S. streets. Period. You don't do that. That's authoritarianism. That's unconstitutional. That's against the First Amendment. And might I say, there's a supreme irony of giving a speech and saying, I'm the law and order president, as you're threatening to override the supreme law of the land. Trump is threatening to break the law because it is unconstitutional to send in the U.S. military and deploy them on U.S. streets for a job they're not supposed to do, not capable of, and would end up effectively silencing all protests and demonstrations. It's the same irony of police brutality sparks these protests and riots and looting and all that stuff. And the response from the police is more police brutality. Oh my God, police brutality is so bad. Everybody get out there in the streets. And the police go, I can't wait to prove you guys right and be more violent. That's exactly what's happening. And the law and order president, Donald Trump, is saying, I will break the supreme law of the land and deploy the U.S. military on U.S. soil. It's a game changer. I went from 98% sure I'm not going to vote for Biden to now I'm 50-50. I don't know what the hell I'm going to do. Because this I cannot stand. This I cannot abide. This is not just normal, regular, schmegular bad. This is next level.